them sleight of hand tricks. So I ignored my good intention. Called that number anyway. The doctor on the line said she'd get me in that day. Dr. Juice, Sister Squeeze. Dr. Juice, Sister Squeeze. Satisfaction guaranteed. Dr. Juice, Sister Squeeze. Dr. Juice, Sister Squeeze.
Autolite carburetors, there you go. If you have one of these on your car, what we're going to be talking about today is some things you just might not know about these carburetors and little things that can be a problem with them, as well as things that kind of get out of hand with these carbs if they sit around for a little bit like this one has. Stick around.
Dr. Juice.
Restoration of a classic Ford is a journey of discovery. Let Autocrafters help you with yours. We offer quality parts for Falcon, Fairlane, F-Series, Galaxy, Maverick, and Pinto. Contact us today.
All right, so the Autolite 2100 and the Autolite 4100 share everything in common, with the exception of the fact that, you know, you have another bowl back here and two more throats for the carburetor, or venturis if you want to be specific about it. What I'm going to talk about right now, though, is some of the things that a lot of guys don't really understand or know about these carburetors. These are not swappables. You can't just take this carburetor off of a 1964 Falcon, throw it on a 1972 Ford pickup truck, and expect it to run exactly like it should run on a 72 Ford pickup truck. And that is because of something that Ford did, which was a little bit unusual with these carburetors. And that's the Annular Discharge boosters. I'm going to roll this thing over so you can take a look at it. The Annular Discharge boosters are down here in the bottom below your choke plate here, and they are, oddly enough, quite specific per car. There were a number of different Annular Discharge boosters that Ford made for these things, anywhere from something for a Galaxy down to a Falcon. They were lettered. And I personally don't know where we could find the information on what letter goes with what type of car, but they are a lettered thing. The thing I really like about the Autolite 2100 and 4100 is the fact that it has the Annular Discharge booster. This booster system is a lot different than anything like Holley or anybody else did, because it actually acts a lot more like a fuel injector than it does a booster for a Holley. So when you look at this thing, you're going to be seeing something that is just a lot neater, if you will, for fuel consumption. These carburetors run a little bit cleaner than a Holley or an Edelbrock or anything else, just simply because of the way those boosters are set up. But they are specific. That is why Ford put carburetor numbers on the side of the plates of them here. You can possibly see that right there. This is a C40FA carburetor, which is correct for a 1964 Falcon manual shift. And on top of this one, you'll be able to also see the C40AF tag. Now, I don't know if this is the correct tag for this carb. I'm assuming that it is. And this carburetor runs quite nicely on this Falcon. The only complaint I've had here lately is it's got a stumble off idle, and it didn't have that before, right after I bought it and on up until I quit driving it regularly a couple of years ago. Maybe more like 6 years ago. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to start pulling it apart and talking about little things that are going to be a problem. One of the first things I'm going to address is your accelerator pump right here on front. And I'm going to get a screwdriver and pull the accelerator plate cover off of it so we can take a look at that pump and see what kind of condition it's in, and I'll tell you why it's a problem. Now, one of the reasons that Ford accelerator pumps are such a problem is because of how Ford mounted them, because these things sit in fuel. And over time, if the accelerator pump sits in fuel, the fuel drains out, the accelerator pump will dry out because a lot of the ethanol gases that we're forced to run in a lot of areas these days, it will just start to dry that out. We've talked to a couple of people about possibly reproducing the accelerator pump in the correct diaphragm push, I guess you would call it, for these with an alcohol base. So in other words, you would use like a diaphragm for an alcohol carburetor. So far, the response has been overwhelming. Ain't nobody doing nothing with it. That's just okay. That's fine, but it's not. Now I'm going to pull the accelerator pump off of this, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the other things related to the accelerator pump. And what I'll do is I'll get a little box to put all these screws in. The interesting thing about these carburetors too is that Ford used flat blade screws on the carburetor, and it's about the only place that they used flat blade screws. It's kind of weird. Get that off of there. Yeah, this one's going to be a friendly little cuss. Should be liking where it's living. All right, it popped off. Now I'm going to try to take it off of here. You can still get these from Autocrafters. All right, the inside of this one actually looks pretty clean, but what does the gasket material in here that controls the accelerator pump itself feel like? It's not too bad on this one. If it's going to do anything, you'll see cracking out around this edge right here on the accelerator pump, and I'm not really seeing any. Of course, I don't have my glasses on, so I need to put those on to be able to see. Yep, the accelerator pump gasket looks pretty good. Knowing the list number on your carburetor with the C4OF will get you where you need to be with the accelerator pump setups as well. These are, like I said, they are specific to certain Autolites. Know your Autolite before you send it off. Everything looks good in here. It's actually fairly clean. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the top off. All right, first tip I'm going to give you on a carburetor is this. Don't spend a ton of money on a carburetor stand for your carburetor. Go down to the hardware store, get some fine thread bolts that match the nuts that are on your carburetor base plate, and put those together, and voila, you've got a carburetor stand. I'm not going to give you a specific bolt size because some folks have gone in and changed out the carburetor bases on their Autolites or whatever, so I'm not going to say which size it is. But just get something that's about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. It'll give you enough room to be able to actuate the throttle plates and everything on the car. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top off of this one. Again, a fairly easy proposition. These are not rocket science items. The carburetors are fairly simply made. The only biggest problem I found on them is just taking the choke apart over here, because you have to get all of this discombobulated and moved in order to get the top plate off. All right, now on Autolite carburetors, if you're taking it apart, this center stud right here actually holds the back half of your Autolite 2100 together. It's not as critical on the 4100s, but it is still something that needs to be installed on the carburetor. I'm going to pull that off. Usually you can just loosen it, and then you can hand spin it out. All right, you'll note that there is a gasket on here. Don't run this without a gasket on there, because I don't know if this is a vacuum area or not, but it's better to be safe than sorry. That goes into my bucket of bolts. This should now be removable, theoretically. I haven't had this cap off in a little while. All right, so normally on the 2100, there's a small C-clip that goes right here that controls the choke operation on this. Make sure that you get that back on the arm down here on the choke. If you don't, your choke won't operate. The inside of this carburetor is, oddly enough, pretty darn clean. It looks good in here. I don't see anything that makes me want to get freaky upset about it. It does have some trash and junk and goo in the bottom of the bowl. All right, now I've made a specialty tool. This is one of my older screwdrivers that I took and modified by grinding down the tip of the thing so that I could use it on these big format screws that Ford used on the Annular discharge boosters. So I'm going to knock that loose so you can take a look at what I'm talking about with these things. All right, now the nice thing about it is when Ford did the lettering on the Annular discharge boosters, you couldn't see it from any other place than after removal. There is an H on the bottom side of the Annular discharge boosters. So that tells me if there's an H, there must be an A through H out there in the world, and probably on beyond that. I've seen these in any number of different configurations with the small nozzles on the boosters, like these holes here on the sides. I've seen all kind of configurations for those, and it's just anybody's guess. I mean, I'm sure that out there in the world, someone has all the information on which one of these discharge boosters went with this exact carburetor or a 289 hypo or whatever you had this on. I mean, these things were even used on AMC products at one point. So there's a lot of them out there. I'm going to set that aside. Now there's also a pin down inside of the center of this annular discharge booster assembly inside the screw, and I'll show you that right here. So there's a pin that fits down inside of here that's what holds everything together. You put the pin in, then you put the annular discharge booster in as well. So that's part of that, and it goes up inside of there. And sometimes it'll get stuck up inside the screw if everything's a little less than copacetic in there. There's also a check ball down inside of here as well. If you don't have the check ball in that position there, you're going to have issues with the carburetors, and this is the check ball that comes with them. I'm going to put that in my little box of parts. Now to get the floats out, there is a spring clip over the needle and seat assembly here, and the float will now just pop out. Very easy to remove at that point. This is a good time to check your needle and seat and see what kind of condition it's in. Pull that off, and there's your float. Now this one's got some scummy stuff on it, so I'll probably clean that float up to get this off of there, because it's going to change the way your float readout is signaling at that point. So that goes aside. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at my needle seat and feel it and eyeball it, and it actually looks like this one's in pretty good shape. It's not got any problems with marking from inside of the seat there. That in my box is stuff. All right, now way down at the bottom of these carburetors, right in front of the power valve, are the main jets. There's two jets in here, and this screwdriver that I created is what I use to remove those. The Ford early jets or later jets like these are Ford specific. You can't just use like Holley jets on them, because they're a bigger, fatter diameter than the original Holley jets. And I'm going to take and clean these up too. The seats of them in the bottom are a little dirty in here, which makes me wonder if I've got some trash down inside the fuel system there. So I'm going to take these and set them aside. Those are gold. They do reproduce them. Mike's Carburetors, a couple other places out there in the business world sell them. You seat it on there and then you turn it, it'll snap loose. You want these to be fairly tight when you're doing these carburetors. These are designated. They have a size on them like the Holleys do. And so you'll want to look for that and know what you've got. As long as both of the jets are the same size, you should be really good on that. If one jet side is bigger than the other, then somebody's been in the carburetor probably mucking around and doing some things that are, in their head, very good ideas, but in reality, probably aren't. All right, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to try to flip it over quickly so that I don't get so much junk rolling around inside the carburetor body, possibly infecting areas where I don't want it to be, because there's something I'm going to show you after I pull the power valve out of it. There we go, pretty quick. Again, our friends at Ford decided to use flat blades on everything. The thing I'm concerned about on this carburetor is it looks like I've got some weeping on the back side of it back here. I don't ever like to over tighten these things, but sometimes you can under tighten them and it causes you a problem as well. So, just the right amount of pressure is what should be applied. Gasket looks pretty good. The bottom of this is nice and clean, indicating to me that there's probably not a lot of over leaching of fuel out into this. The power valve may be decent. The way it's set up is you'd almost have to have a 12-point socket to get on this. What I do is I'll remove the idle mixture screws, and you're going to need to take these out and look at them anyway, because these are probably one of your other stalling points on these carburetors. These can get fouled on the ends. If someone's gone in and over tightened them, they can have shoulders on them, and that will lead to other problems with idle as well. Now I can use my handy dandy adjustable set to the Holley power valve size, which is what this is. This is actually just a Holley power valve. I like that they use the same ones as Ford. That looks pretty good. Holley power valves are usually marked. I've even seen Holley power valves marked on the very end out here. This looks like it might be a 6. But I will check it against my books to see what the books say for power valve on that. This all looks pretty clean underneath here. I don't see anything that's making me feel like, oh crap, we got a problem, other than the fact that it's just not wanting to accelerate the way it's supposed to. There's a ring around the base of the power valve here, and that is a catch-all. That is for any junk that gets bypassed on the filter on your early cars that have them down on the pump, and it catches any of the junk that may be in the carburetor. I liked the catch-all thing. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it back out in the yard. I'm going to use some carburetor choke cleaner and clean up inside the bowls, down inside the ports. I'm also going to get some wire out of here that I use for my tuning stuff. I'm going to show you this right now. I have a friend that plays guitar, and he likes a really hard string set. I don't know what they are, but I like using these things right here for carburetor cleaning. You can run these down through any of the ports on the carburetor. They're a stiff enough wire, they don't bend up real easy, and you can use them to clean out the ports and check how everything's operating down inside the carburetor. Just to make sure they're clear. These are very important too. These are your bleeds for fuel into the carburetor at idle. This thing wasn't having a problem idling, it was having a problem under acceleration, but when I'm cleaning stuff, I'll go back in and hit all these ports. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my carburetor choke cleaner. I'm going to run the carburetor choke cleaner and listen to make sure it sounds like it's going in those holes. I want to push any debris that I have back down into the bottom of the carburetor onto this plastic rather than trying to push it out through the holes, because if it's stopped in those holes, it's typically stopped from the back side, not from the throat side where I'm squirting in. You can hear that maybe. And you'll see that when I spray these, the top one here, that it shoots carburetor choke cleaner out, the mixture adjustment right here. And that's your vacuum port right there. See it coming out the side of it. But I'm spraying back into these to make sure we're good and clean on those idle adjustment mixtures. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take and run my bigger wire down through the air vents, and you'll see it come out in the bottom. All I'm doing with all this is just trying to make sure that there's no obstructions inside of the carburetor while it's running. That's really my only goal here. But I'm going to take and pull this off now. It's probably going to be a little hard to see, but there is some debris on the tabletop here from me cleaning out the carburetor. Now that may be what was causing the issue with the run problem, or it may just be that that was just some debris that was inside the bowls of the carburetor before the cleaning process. And I'm going to say give you another little tip on these carbs. I've got my jets cleaned up. Both of them are 44Fs. Ford marked their jets for an F or just a standard jet because they were using Holley jets on some of the carburetors. If they're marked with a 44F, you know you have a Ford jet rather than a Holley jet. When you're putting these in, try and finger seat them in place. These things are a bear because of where they're at. It's not an easy jet change on your carburetor for an Autolite. You don't set them right. You could cross thread these down inside the bore and that'll ruin your carburetor because you have a brass jet going into an aluminum body. So just be real careful with it. Finger tight. Don't get real crazy with it when you're screwing them in. If you're having a Gorilla to start up, you're doing it wrong. Make sure they're centered on the jet when you're final tightening it, because you don't want to tick the edge of the jet. That'll cause a little bit of a malformation in the flow of the jet. I don't know that it really matters that much because, let's face it, we're looking at something where it has slots on the side of it. So tighten them down good. Don't go too hard because it can be a real pain to get them back out later. You heard how mine ticked when they came out. There you go. All right, now I'm going to take my float and I'm going to clean it up a little bit just to get some of the schmutz off of it. I like the brass floats rather than the poly floats. If you can get a brass one, do that. The only bad thing about the brass floats over the polys is that when you have a brass float, you can develop a leak in it and the float will start to sink and won't maintain a correct float level. Don't hold it too tight. You can collapse the sides on it. And there's varying opinions on it, whether you should use the brass floats or use the poly floats. Use what you want to use and work with it and see what you get. Only reason I like using the brass floats is because that's what Ford used originally. So if it's what was in there from day one, It's what this carburetor, so to speak, expects to see. And I'm going to put my needle and seat back in. Now the needle and seat and float assembly arm goes back over here. That goes on the needle and seat. And then this arm goes back over the top. Use a screwdriver to seat it. There. Basically what I try to do is I'll work the float after I get it in there. And I don't want my float so much that it's up at the top. Now what I find a lot of times with these Autolites is they will flood out the float and then it'll dump too much gas into the carburetor and it'll stall the engine. A lot of that happens with these. So I try to run my floats a little under, especially if I'm not doing any kind of performance driving with this carburetor. I want them a little lower so that I don't suffer that whenever I'm going over speed bumps or I'm hitting chuck holes in the road or whatever. And that will be a problem that can happen. Be sure to always remember and tab in your choke before you tighten everything down, because once you get the top on, it's going to be a real pain in the butt to do that. All right, this is your bowl vent. If you have any kind of vomit problems from your carburetor, you're going to get fuel out here spreading around the top of the carburetor. That'll let you know that your floats are probably set a little bit too high. If you're running ethanol fuels, they tend to expand a little bit more than standard non-ethanol gas. So you'll want to keep an eyeball on that. If you start seeing a lot of bleed up here, you may have a problem. Now we've shown you some stuff over at Autorestomod on where that can be an issue, but what I wanted to just do is mention that that is where your overflow is. All right, now I've got these started. On the accelerator pump, what I'll tend to do is I'll put a little bit of grease on this piston here that deploys the actual accelerator pump, and I'll also put a little bit of some type of lubricant on this pivot shaft as well. Got to remember that all this stuff pivots, and if it's got any kind of binding on it when it's finally installed, you're going to have a problem with the accelerator pump not wanting to operate correctly. And I'm just going to do my cross tightening here. You've got a spring in there, don't forget your spring. And on these early accelerator pumps, like on the 64 Falcon, there is a weep hole at the bottom. If the accelerator pump pops on these, the weep hole will let you know that you have a problem because there'll be a stain of gasoline down here underneath the accelerator pump. All right, now what I want to talk a little bit about is the accelerator pump functions. The further out you go on the accelerator pump, the more gas pump you get with it, and this bar here on the accelerator pump is also goes from a lean to a rich on the mixture. Typically Ford wants a 3, which is 3 up from the bottom, so that's this one, and it goes in this way and sets in here, but you can't install that because there is a tab on the accelerator bar. Dudes, always get yourself a set of manuals for these things because all of this information is in the original Ford service manuals because they showed you how to work on the carburetor if you're a service tech. That's what they were for. All right, so that's it. I'm not going to do any more today. I have to move the Falcon out of the shop in order to get the things done that need to be done. That means I got to move the Mach 1 out of the way that's in the yard and then all the other cars. I am so ready to be at our new facility because this won't be an issue anymore. We won't have to move 17 different cars just to get one car out of the shop to test it. This will be tested. Hopefully everything will run fine because I need to do a driving experience with the car. All that's in the future. Everything I showed you should work. If you have any kind of issues, leave a comment in the section below, or better yet, contact me at the email address I'm putting right here. That email address will get you right to me and I can help you diagnose the issues. I am not a carburetor dude. There are a lot of guys out there way better at this than I am. I'm just showing you the little things I've learned over the years messing with these carburetors. A lot of people would give the Autolite carburetors some crap. They're actually a pretty good carburetor. They work very, very well when they're in good nick. So, all that being said, that's our show for this week. Do me a favor though, go out and check out our Patreon account. At the $10 a month level, you get monthly meetings with me on Zoom. We sit down and we have a good time. There's a number of people in there. We'll have anywhere from 15 to 20 people right now. It's been growing. But we also do tech question Q&A. We talk about everybody's cars. I love hearing y'all's stories, and it's a great way for us to sit down and talk together. And oddly enough, we pick up a lot of video ideas from the Patreon group and also the comments below. Another thing I'd like you to do is subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notification. If you don't ding the bell, You're never gonna know anything. YouTube sure as heck ain't gonna tell you, because that's the way they find out whether or not we're invading your privacy. So, do me a favor, like each other, love on each other, treat each other nice. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on down the road. I gotta put it all back on now. I like these little carburetors. They're so flippin' easy. It's like a carburetor for a lawnmower. It's just bigger and more barrels and more stuff, things, lots of parts. It's really not like a lawnmower carburetor when you think about it.